Okay, we're just going to keep going here and talk a little bit more about altering and adjusting colors and just fixing stuff that maybe is a little bit messed up. So, like, let's pretend that you have something that you decided to add in here. Some footage that you shot like this that's maybe not, that's maybe just not quite like what you were hoping for. So, in this case, I had this project where I needed this character to kind of like roll around on the floor and get attacked by birds, right? But you can see if you look at it that I had messed up the way that the the matte sort of the cyclorama behind this thing was done. I just didn't really do a very good job of shooting the footage. So there's certain things you can do to try to like solve your problems or fix it, or maybe you can get lucky and make it work. So I'm just going to try and make it look like the figure is isolated against a nice white background. So the first thing that I would do is just draw a mask around this thing, right? So I would just grab the pen tool, make sure I have my footage over here selected, and maybe lock everything off that I'm not going to mess with. And we'll just draw like a line around this. And I kind of like to curve the edges, right, just to keep it from looking too hard, like a straight line. And then as I get closer in here, I'm just going to like try my best to keep it on the... Okay, so that's nice, right? I got rid of my background there, got all of the... like that extra ugly stuff out of there, and it mostly works pretty well for this particular thing. So, but you can kind of see that as he leans forward, I see some more of the sort of details that are over here that I didn't maybe want to see. So, one of the amazing things about After Effects that you can do is you can actually keyframe a mask. So what I would do if this was my actual project is I would click down here, I would click on the mask, twirl down further into the mask, and I would just keyframe this mask path. So I'm going to hit that button there that says, add a keyframe in that spot, and then I would just move it forward, and as he kind of leans forward like that, then I would grab my mask and I would just pull, oops, make sure I have the mask path adjusted there, grab that, zoom in on a little bit maybe. And you can see that you can actually like kind of keyframe that. So we just kind of are masking the trouble areas out, right? So it's going to interpolate between the two. You can see I've got some overlap, but you can see how you'd be able to adjust that over time. And just slowly add some things to it so that you can't see that my little mistake over there so much. So you're thinking to yourself, yeah, that really still looks terrible. Like, you're not going to trick anyone with that, Scott. So one thing you could try is you could try feathering the mask. Because if I just fade the edges a little bit, well, that helps some. I could also expand the mask in a little bit or out, just depending on what I needed. So sometimes the fuzzy edges, I think, help somewhat. All right, now we're looking a little bit better at least. But that yellow color in here has got to go, right? I'm going to have to figure out a way to sort of fix that. So I can animate my mask. I can block out back areas. This is how they do special effects in movies. Like if it looks like someone's hanging off the edge of a cliff, but they were really not hanging off the edge of the cliff. They were hanging in front of a green screen, and they just knocked the green screen out behind it. So what we'll want to do is we'll want to try and adjust the color on this. So if I click the layer, and I go up to the effect, I can go to my color correction, right? And I can go, and I'm going to go with, I think maybe the first thing I'll do is just brightness and contrast. So you can see up here in the effects controls, it automatically adjusted for me and gave me the palette for that. So now I can just crank up my contrast a little bit and my brightness and see if I can get that out of there. And it's still pretty yellow, right? So that one's maybe not quite right. I'll go back up to effect. I'll go to color correction. I'll go to, in this case, I'm going to go to curves, which is usually my default one. And curves is kind of this fancy thing, but you can see that it's got these inputs and outputs, and you can see how it's kind of blasting that out and adding a whole lot more white, right? And if I drag it down here, it's going to add more gray. This slider, this edge over here, controls the contrast. But the cool thing about curves is you can just kind of click and drag on it, and slowly but surely I can maybe get rid of some of the background. So I'm pretty close there now, right? I mean, the color's a little bit whacked out, but I've at least got it sort of matching kind of the edges, right? But you can see that I've got these all piled up on top of each other. So I can actually go back now and I can adjust the brightness even a little bit more, maybe crank up the contrast some. And then if I want to, I can actually add another effect on top of this. So let's say I go to Effect, I go to Color Control or Color Correction, and I go to let's see, Hue and Saturation. And in this case, I go into my master saturation. I just crank the saturation back a little bit so it's not so yellow. And then, I can actually go in there and adjust like which color range it gives me. I can play around with all of these things. There's, again, no end to the stuff you can do. But now it looks a little bit more like my guy is getting, like, harassed and assaulted by these birds. So, again, you get the gist of it. You can go in and turn these on and off. It'll adjust everything as you go. But if I drag this guy back all the way down underneath this, since I have everything else set as a multiply layer, it kind of all happens right over the top of everything else. And it allows me to take footage that's kind of crummy and maybe make some use out of it as the birds, as the birds attack this poor sucker laying in the middle of the ground, right? So I can you can see I could animate a whole lot of those birds as they come over and sort of take that guy down. So I hope that makes some sense for just like how to use masks in a more advanced way and how to change your color correction. And again, all that happens here in this effects control panel. You can toggle those on and off and sort of pile them up on top of each other.